So, am I the asshole for calling the cops on my own sister? At her wedding? After she tried to kill me? Before you answer, you need to understand that this story isn't about a single phone call. It's about the slow, creeping realization that the person you love most in the world might be the one holding the knife. The late autumn sun bled gold across the Napa Valley vineyards, casting a glow that made everything look like a perfectly curated memory. Glasses clinked. Laughter echoed softly against the scent of aging oak and ripe grapes. It was my sister Sabrina's wedding, a multi-$100,000 affair she had meticulously planned, and from the outside it was flawless. I was Clara, her maid of honor, her older sister, and her biggest supporter. And standing beside me, a quiet anchor in this sea of performative joy, was my husband. He wasn't just my husband. He was a former combat medic, a man trained to see threats where others saw celebration. Caleb saw it long before I did. He saw the subtle cracks in the perfect golden facade. A shadow that had a name, Sabrina. When she walked towards me, her designer dress shimmering, she was the picture of bridal perfection. She smiled, a brilliant, camera-ready smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. "Clara, you look beautiful," she'd said, her voice like honey. "Thank you for making today perfect." And I believed her. I wanted to believe her. She was my little sister, the one I had sworn to protect, especially after the accident. The accident that had shattered her dream of becoming a professional dancer had also shattered a part of me. I was 16, she was 13. A stupid, childish fight on a staircase. A misstep. A fall. An ankle that never healed right. The doctor said her career was over before it began. My guilt from that day became a ghost that haunted our relationship. It was the reason I helped fund this lavish wedding. The reason I never said no, the reason I ignored the little barbs, the flashes of jealousy in her eyes. That guilt was the currency she spent for years, and I had willingly paid every single time. It was a debt I thought I could never fully repay. And that evening, under the glittering fairy lights, she was about to present me with the final, terrible invoice. The first course was a pumpkin bisque, served in elegant, wide-brimmed bowls. It was Sabrina's choice, a taste of autumn to match the evening's theme. Waitstaff moved with practiced grace between the tables, a silent ballet of service. But then something unusual happened. The head chef, Marco, a man with a Michelin-starred reputation, personally brought out the first two plates. One for Sabrina and one for me. A special honor for the bride and her maid of honor, I thought. He didn't look at me or Sabrina. His eyes were fixed on a point somewhere over my shoulder, his jaw tight. He placed the bowls down with a hand that was just slightly unsteady. "Enjoy," he muttered, the word clipped and devoid of any warmth. That's when I saw it. Or rather, Caleb saw it and I saw him. His posture had changed. The relaxed husband enjoying a party was gone, replaced by the hypervigilant medic. His gaze wasn't on me, but locked onto the interaction between Sabrina and the chef. Sabrina, who was in a deep conversation with a cousin, had looked up at that exact moment, her eyes meeting Marco's for a fraction of a second before he turned and almost fled back to the kitchen. It was an almost imperceptible exchange, a ghost of a nod so fleeting that if I had blinked I would have missed it. But Caleb didn't blink. "Did you see that?" he whispered, his body angled towards me, creating a small pocket of privacy. "See what? That the chef is a little stressed on a big night?" "Caleb, relax," I murmured back, trying to will the tension out of his shoulders with my own forced calm. My instinct was to smooth things over, to believe in the perfect picture. It was easier than confronting the alternative. "No, it was more than that," he insisted. His knuckles were white, Clara, where he was gripping the tray. For a man who had faced down gunfire, he looked unnerved by a bowl of soup. It was so out of character that a tiny cold seed of doubt finally began to sprout inside me. I glanced at my soup. It was a beautiful deep orange swirled with cream. It smelled divine. What could possibly be wrong? "You're overthinking this," I said, a little more sharply this time, partly to convince myself. Caleb didn't argue. He just picked up his own spoon and took a small taste from his bowl, which had arrived with the general service. He chewed thoughtfully, his eyes never leaving my plate. Then he put the spoon down. "The color," he murmured, his voice so low it was almost a vibration. "Your bowl. It's a fraction of a shade darker than mine." I leaned in, my heart starting to beat a little faster. He was right. It was a minuscule difference, something no one would ever notice unless they were specifically looking for it. A difference that could be explained by 100 innocent things. A little more spice, a different ladle. But what he said next sent a cold dread coiling in my stomach. As a medic, you learn that tiny details are the only things that matter. A slight change in skin pallor, a half-second delay in pupil response. A shade of difference in two identical dishes. Suddenly, the beautiful, fragrant bisque in front of me felt less like food and more like a threat. Before I could even process that thought, Caleb was already in motion. He didn't make a scene. He was too smart for that. He leaned over to our mother, who was happily chatting away, and with a charming smile said, "Clara and I are just going to sneak down to the cellar for a moment. I want to surprise her. I heard they have a private reserve Cabernet from the year you were born," he said to me, his voice light and conversational, a chillingly perfect performance. He took my hand, his grip firm and insistent, a silent command. I followed, my mind a confused swirl of denial and a terrifying budding belief. We walked past smiling guests, past the string quartet, past the laughter and the light. No one gave us a second glance. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a terrifying certainty. "We are not staying for the main course." As the heavy oak door swung shut behind us, the joyful noise of the wedding was instantly cut off, replaced by a profound, echoing silence. Down here, the air was cold, thick with the smell of damp earth and fermenting fruit. Felt like a tomb. Rows upon rows of wine bottles slept in the dim light, silent witnesses to what was about to unfold. I turned to him, my voice trembling. "Caleb, what is this? You're scaring me." He didn't answer immediately. He walked over to a rack, pulled out a dusty bottle, and examined the label, gathering his thoughts. "The soup," he finally said, turning to face me. "Your allergy. It's shellfish, right? Severe." "Yes, you know that. Anaphylactic. Why?" He leaned closer, his expression thoughtful as if replaying the scene in his mind. His eyes narrowed. He looked up, his gaze locking with mine, filled with a chilling seriousness. "It wasn't just the color, Clara, though your bowl was a fraction of a shade darker." He paused, letting the silence hang in the cold air. And I could smell it, faintly underneath all that pumpkin and spice. "It's the unmistakable scent of shellfish concentrate." The words hit me with the force of a physical blow. Shellfish. My allergy wasn't mild. It was anaphylactic. A trip to the emergency room, an intubation, a brush with death. My sister knew that. She had been there, holding my hand, crying the last time it happened 5 years ago. "No," I whispered, shaking my head, the denial a reflex. "No, she wouldn't. Marco wouldn't. It's a mistake." Was it a mistake when she gave Marco that nod, Clara? Was his hand shaking by accident? He wasn't asking about my well-being. He was building a case. "Tell me about your father's will, Clara." The question was so jarring, so completely out of left field, that it broke through my panic. "The will? What does that have to do with anything?" "Everything," he said. "He left you the larger share, correct? 70/30ths. Yes, but that was because of her ankle. He wanted me to be able to make sure she was always taken care of." "I know." Caleb's expression softened for a moment. "I remember helping you with the estate paperwork after he passed. I read the whole thing. But there's a second clause, isn't there? A survivorship clause. If something happens to the primary beneficiary." He didn't need to finish. The unspoken words hung in the cold air between us. If I died, my 70% wouldn't go to him or to charity. It would all go to the remaining heir. To Sabrina. "Last month," Caleb continued, his voice low and steady, "Sabrina called me. She said she was helping you with some financial planning. A lie I now realize. She asked me what would happen to your share if you weren't around anymore." I thought it was a strange, morbid question at the time, but I brushed it off. And in the cold, damp air of that wine cellar, the final hideous piece of the puzzle clicked into place. My own sister, my baby sister, was trying to murder me on her wedding day for money. For a past she couldn't forgive and a future she was willing to kill for. The floor seemed to drop out from beneath me, and I leaned against a wine rack to keep from collapsing, the dust and the silence of that tomb-like room pressing in on me. The silence in the cellar stretched for what felt like an eternity, broken only by my own ragged breaths. My grief was a physical thing, a crushing weight in my chest, but Caleb's response was pure, cold logic. He helped me stand, his hand steady on my arms. I wasn't just his wife anymore. I was a civilian he had to extract from a hostile zone. "We're going to walk back up there," he said, his voice low and firm. "We will smile. We will congratulate the happy couple, and then we will leave." He had a mission now. "But first, I'm going to get a sample," he whispered, already forming a plan. "They haven't cleared the tables yet." The thought was brilliant, tactical. Evidence. Returning to the reception was one of the hardest things I've ever had to do. It was like stepping from a black and white reality back into a technicolor lie. The laughter of the guests sounded like screams, the beautiful music like a funeral dirge. Every smiling face seemed like a mask. The entire glittering affair felt like a stage, and I was the only one who had read the tragic final page of the script. Caleb squeezed my hand, a silent reminder that I wasn't alone. We walked towards our table. The bowls were still there. With a sleight of hand born from years of emergency field work, Caleb used a small, clean vial he kept in his pocket for contingencies to discreetly collect a small sample from my untouched soup. No one noticed. And then I saw her. Sabrina. She was gliding between tables, accepting congratulations, the perfect, radiant bride. Our eyes met across the room. She must have seen the shock and horror on my face because her own smile faltered for a barest fraction of a second. And in her eyes, I didn't see a bride. I saw a predator who had just missed her kill. I saw the flash of cold calculation, the flicker of annoyance that her plan had somehow gone awry. She was laughing, head thrown back, holding a glass of champagne, toasting to her new life, a life she was willing to build on top of my grave. That was it. That was the moment all my hesitation, all my love, all my misplaced guilt evaporated. It was replaced by a cold, hard certainty. Caleb started leading me towards the exit, but I stopped. I pulled my hand free from his. He looked at me, a question in his eyes. My hand was shaking as I pulled out my phone. The screen illuminated my tear-streaked face. 1. My finger hovered over the final digit. Was I the asshole for this? For destroying my own family? No. She had already done that. I took a deep breath and I pressed call. The story itself ends there, on that 911 call. A moment suspended between devastation and a terrifying new reality. But the action is only the surface. So let's step back from the shock of the story for a moment and ask the real question. How does a person get to this point? How does a sister at her own wedding attempt to murder the one person who has supported her endlessly? Because the truth is, Sabrina's actions weren't born in a single moment of greed. They were sown over years in the fertile soil of a single twisted belief that her life was a debt Clara owed her. This wasn't just about money. This was about retribution. In Buddhist philosophy, there's a concept known as the three poisons of the mind, the fundamental roots of all suffering: greed, hatred, and delusion. Sabrina was drowning in all three. The greed is obvious, the desire for the $2 million inheritance, for the life of luxury and success it could buy. The hatred is deeper, that burning resentment over a childhood accident, a constant, simmering anger that her sister had a life she felt she was denied. She wasn't just trying to get the inheritance. She was trying to collect on a spiritual IOU that only existed in her own mind. But the most dangerous poison, the one that powered the other two, was delusion. The delusion that Clara was the sole architect of her misery. The delusion that her own failures or lack of fulfillment were someone else's fault. In her story, she wasn't the villain. She was the tragic hero finally taking back what was hers. She had built a narrative in her head where Clara was a lifelong antagonist, and this final act was merely the climax of her own twisted hero's journey. She was a prisoner of her own past, and her only escape plan was to eliminate the person who served as a constant reminder of it. Now let's turn the lens on Clara. Because as monstrous as Sabrina's actions were, Clara herself was not without a flaw that enabled this tragedy to grow. It wasn't malice or selfishness. In fact, it was the opposite. Her flaw was her boundless, unchecked guilt. This is a form of what we might call unhealthy attachment. She was attached to the idea of being the protector, the good sister. She was attached to the memory of that accident and her role in it. Her guilt became a cage, and her love for her sister was the lock. For years, she allowed Sabrina to manipulate her, to chip away at her self-worth, to make withdrawals from an emotional bank account that was perpetually funded by that one childhood mistake. Clara's greatest virtue, her deep, abiding love and sense of responsibility, became her greatest vulnerability. She couldn't see the predator in front of her because she was too busy trying to heal the victim that no longer existed. This is the tragic dance of toxic relationships. One person's poison becomes the other person's prison. Sabrina's hatred needed Clara's guilt to survive, and Clara's guilt needed Sabrina's victimhood to feel purposeful. The cycle continued, escalating in silence for over a decade, until it finally erupted in a beautifully decorated reception hall in Napa Valley. Many people hearing this story would simply say, "That's karma," and they wouldn't be wrong. But the popular Western idea of karma is often a simple one. You do bad things happen to you. But in its truest sense, karma isn't a cosmic vending machine of revenge. It's simpler and far more profound. It is the law of cause and effect. It's the spiritual equivalent of Newton's third law. For every action, there is an equal and opposite reaction. Every action creates a reaction. Every seed sown will one day bear fruit. Sabrina didn't just get caught. She harvested exactly what she planted. Let's look at Sabrina's perfect plan. Each step was a cause that created an immediate effect. The cause: her deep-seated resentment and greed. The effect: a meticulously crafted murder plot. The cause: adding a poison to a dish. The effect: creating physical evidence. The cause: her years of manipulation. The effect: her sister finally seeing the truth. The police weren't some external punishment. They were the direct consequence of dialing 911, which was the direct consequence of putting poison in a bowl. Sabrina wasn't struck down by a bolt of lightning from heaven. Her wedding didn't just get ruined. Her own actions were the wrecking ball. She meticulously built her own prison, brick by treacherous brick. The very stage she built for her triumph became the theater of her downfall. That is the elegant, inescapable mathematics of karma. And this brings us to another, even deeper concept: impermanence. In Buddhism, this is the understanding that nothing lasts forever. Everything is in a constant state of flux. Why is this important? Because the sisterly bond that Clara cherished so deeply? It was impermanent. In fact, it had probably died years ago, and Clara was just in love with a memory. The perfect wedding was an illusion that lasted only a few hours. Even Sabrina's hatred, as intense as it was just a state of mind, not a permanent reality. The core of this tragedy lies in the clash between these two principles. Sabrina's entire plot was a desperate, violent attempt to create a permanent state, wealth and victory, from a temporary emotion, hatred. She wanted to turn a fleeting feeling into an everlasting fact by ending her sister's life. She tried to use a permanent solution, death, to solve what was, at its root, a temporary feeling of inadequacy and resentment. In doing so, she created a permanent consequence for herself, the label of a criminal. This is the ultimate irony. In her fight against the natural law that everything changes, she created a karmic event that has now permanently changed her own life for the worse. And for Clara, her path to healing will also depend on this very principle. She must accept the impermanence of her old relationship with Sabrina, the impermanence of her guilt, and the impermanence of the happy family she thought she had. Because accepting that everything changes, love, relationships, even our own pain, is the first step toward true freedom. So let's circle back to the question that started it all. Is Clara the asshole for calling the cops on her sister at her own wedding? After everything we've analyzed, the years of manipulation, the deep-seated resentment, the cold, calculated murder attempt, the answer might seem obvious. And the answer, from a standpoint of self-preservation and karmic consequence, is a resounding no. Her call to the police wasn't an act of revenge. It was an act of consequence. It was the final necessary effect to her sister's devastating cause. She didn't start the fire. She just stopped trying to put it out with her own soul. She wasn't destroying her family. She was surviving its implosion. But her real challenge, the final stage of her journey, wasn't dialing 911. That was a reaction. Her true path to healing lies in what comes next. True freedom for Clara won't come from the sound of a jail cell door slamming shut on her sister. It won't come from the court's verdict or the inheritance money she was entitled to. It will come from something much quieter and much more difficult. This is the final and perhaps hardest lesson from this story. The art of letting go. This isn't the same as forgiving. Forgiveness might come one day or it might not. Letting go is different. It is for herself. She has to let go of the guilt she has carried for nearly 2 decades, a weight that was never truly hers to bear. She has to let go of the version of Sabrina she loved, the ghost of a sister that she kept trying to save, in order to accept the reality of the person Sabrina actually is. She has to let go of the need for an apology, for understanding, for closure from the person who hurt her. The ultimate revenge is not seeing your enemy fall. It's being able to walk away from the battlefield, healed and whole. It's realizing that your peace of mind is more valuable than their punishment. Because peace is not the absence of a storm, but the ability to be calm within it. And that calm only comes when you finally let go of the rope. The journey of letting go is universal. Whether it's a toxic relationship, a painful memory, or a version of yourself that no longer serves you. So my question to you is, what have you had to release to reclaim your peace? Let's create a space for healing in the comments below. If you believe storytelling can be a tool for understanding and growth, join our community by subscribing for more stories that matter. Thank you for being here.